The Force of Others, a Star Wars podcast.
Hello there, and welcome to the Force of Others. I'm Matt Beutner.
I'm Zach Turner.
We finally did it, man. We have a Star Wars podcast.
10 years in the making.
Welcome to the first episode of Exactly What the World Needs, another Star Wars podcast.
Absolutely.
So we're bringing you the things that you don't have thousands of yet, but this one is us, so it's different.
Hey, everybody's unique, so...
And everybody is unique, and that is kind of going to be the point of this show. So why the Force of Others? Not only is it a line from Rogue One, it is the original name of the Force. I don't know. It's one of the original names of the Force from the 10,000 original Star Wars drafts. But the Force of Others, because at least to me, and I'm pretty sure Zach agrees, the Force is about connection. It's about talking with other people and discussing with other people, and connecting with them, like I said a minute ago. And
I disagree.
Really
the Force is only about midichlorians in your blood, so...
Yeah, it's about nothing else. It is only that's it.
It's only the midichlorian count, duh.
Yeah, we'll get into all that later. But I want this podcast, we want this podcast to be a home for discussion and debate, positive and negative, whatever it is. But
as long as it's healthy.
Exactly, as long as it's healthy. And if you follow me on Twitter, you'll see me get unhealthy a lot, and you can call me out on those things. But anyway, I am excited that while it took us 10 years to get around to making a podcast, the first thing we get to talk about is a show that's as deep and complex as the ACOLYTE.
Mm-hmm. I love this show. I'm going to get a lot of hate, I think, on the internet for that, but I do. I love it. I mean, I think it's a little slow at the beginning, but I think by the end it really found its footing, and I hope it gets a second season, because if it doesn't, then I'm going to be mad, because I got to know what happens.
Yeah, I don't want to get to the end too quick, but I will go ahead and say I like it a lot. I don't necessarily love it. I love parts of it, but I like it a lot. I don't think it deserves the hate that it has gotten. I truly am baffled by most of the comments that I've seen trashing it or whatever. But you know, that's just my viewpoint. But I also want there to be a second season for reasons I'll get into later specifically. But you know, I guess it is worth mentioning that we're in kind of this nebulous time where we don't know if there's going to be a second season. And after what this season was, it's kind of like watching The Empire Strikes Back, not knowing if there's ever going to be a Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I think it'll all come down to ratings, you know? Because sometimes any publicity is good publicity, right? So, like, even the hate might be good for it. So.
Well, but, I mean, you know, I guess it's probably worth talking about that Disney and Lucasfilm, they're not opposed to essentially disavowing Star Wars projects that get a lot of negativity around them.
Yeah.
You know, not to get too far into it, but the Rian Johnson trilogy that was announced and never spoken of again. Did they announce that before The Last Jedi came out?
It was either before or directly after. They're like, wow, we agree with this. And I know we disagree on this, but I think Rian Johnson actually took swings, and I think it's a great thing.
hey, I don't disagree. We will have a Last Jedi episode at some point. I think that we're hitting on all the stuff that is going to get us loved and hated in moment one. So let's set your expectations now, y'all.
Look, you're either going to love us or going to hate us, and hopefully you're going to love one of us or the other.
And if you hate us, that's fine. Let us know in the comments. Just please don't be mean about it, because I'll cry. But no, when it comes to Rian Johnson, what I always say about The Last Jedi is I think it is the best written, the best directed Disney Lucasfilm movie. I just don't necessarily agree with the ideas that it was writing and directing, if that makes sense. Like, I have my issues with what the story was, but the way that they executed the story was stellar. I was just still sitting there going, well, I'm sad about Luke. So anyway, but all that to say, we're talking about the ACOLYTE right now.
Yeah, Luke isn't even around, right?
And then we'll get to all of that. But I really
before?
hope, if nothing else, I do want to say I hope that they do a season 2. I don't want this to be a Solo or a Last Jedi or anything like that where it doesn't get received over the top
Solo's
amazingly.
kind of getting something if they do end up doing the Lando show.
Well, but that's kind of what I mean. Like they were set. John Kasdan, the co-writer of Solo, tweeted sometime around Solo coming out and being kind of not a blockbuster, right?
Yeah.
Tweeted that they were planning, I think, at least one, if not two other movies, that they weren't in pre-production, but they were gonna move on with them, and then Disney kind of put the kibosh on all of that. And then there's been the quotes coming of somebody, I don't know, it was either Kennedy or Bob Iger talking about how Solo taught them that recasting was a bad move.
I disagree, but
no, me too. But I saw that and I was like, no, don't learn the wrong lessons. Anyway,
right.
ACOLYTE, and it's worth saying this is a full spoiler situation, friends.
Oh, 100%.
Yes.
It's all out.
So
we're even 2 weeks behind?
Hey man,
3 weeks?
You'd be surprised. I got chewed out for spoiling The Office a couple weeks ago, and I think that show ended
20 years ago at this.
It wasn't 20 years ago, man. My gosh. We're not that old, okay? But just full spoilers. If you haven't watched it yet and you want to go in spoiler-free, this is not the podcast for you. Next week will be for you. But if you don't mind spoilers, hang around. So anyway, we've kind of given our overall feelings. We both feel generally positively about it. But as we're diving into the discussion now, Zach, what are the things that you really liked about the show?
I liked that it had a very specific style to it. I felt like it was very influenced by, martial arts movies. You could see that, heavily influenced. I loved the, crunchy feel of the technology being 100 years in the past from Phantom Menace. The droids aren't all there, but they still have their little personality. Or I remember it really hitting me. I think it's in the first episode when she's trying to get out of that prison ship, and you saw the chairs and they were kind of the backs were it was something about the back of the chair that I was like, wow, that's crunchy. So whoever the production set designer on that, I saw your chair, all right? I saw it. But I don't know, the straps didn't automatically come down. She had to click and click and click, and all the dials and stuff. It did a great job of feeling 100 years in the past, but still being in the future from where we are. Highlights for me for sure are Lee Jung. I'm gonna say it wrong. Lee Jung Jae, I believe it's how it's pronounced.
You got it.
For Soul.
Yes, I think we got it.
Yes.
Yeah.
I thought he was fantastic. I heard that he learned English in 3 months for this. So amazing.
That's phenomenal.
I thought he was fantastic. I thought Amanda Stenberg as Osha and May. I thought she was incredible. I don't know about you, but for the first few episodes, I was like, is that the same actor? Yes. Is it? No. Yes. No. Yes. So, which just shows how well she did, portraying two different characters that are the same. I thought the fight choreography was top notch. I mean, we saw some stuff that we have never seen.
Get Jedi Kung Fu, man.
Yeah. The amount of punching and kicking in this series is my favorite thing. And that, not to skip to the end, but in that last episode when he Kung Lao or just the freaking bicycle kick in the air.
Yes.
Oh, I was like, yes. Sorry for blowing out the mic. But yeah, I thought the choreo is amazing. I also I'm so sorry. I'm so bad with names. That's why I have it up here.
Oh yeah, I wasn't even gonna try.
Acolyte cast. Terrible with names. Manny Jacinto.
Oh yes,
fantastic. Who
yes.
played I think they're calling him the Stranger, or what are they calling him now?
Chimere
I thought,
and the Stranger.
Yeah. I've seen him in stuff that I have not always enjoyed, but I can always like see the process behind it. I absolutely loved him in this, and I realized he's really been like working his way up through Hollywood, and it's really cool to see him. You know, he was great in The Good Place. Sometimes he was, you know, sometimes I didn't love him in The Good Place, but I always appreciated his character. In this, I think he just knocked it out of the frickin' park. Excuse me. Knocks it out of the frickin' park.
There it is.
We're going to edit that in. We're going to... In this, I think he knocked it out of the frickin' park. There we go.
Awesome.
We'll edit that in.
It doesn't, whatever. Cool. Right on, man. Yeah, well, we have a lot of the same... Those were all your, like, major, like, highlights.
Yeah, those are my major ones.
Yeah, we have a lot of the same ones. I really, kind of in the same vibe, I really loved that it was a new and specific kind of style and new voice. You could tell this was a different perspective than the Jon Favreau, Dave Filoni's of it all, which I love.
Yeah.
That's very much my perspective, and I love that kind of whole Western feel. But this is like you were talking about. This felt like a samurai movie. And I think you could tell that it was written from a feminine perspective.
Yeah, I think Leslie Headland did a fantastic job.
Yeah, I mean, you can tell she's done so many interviews in the last over the run of the show, and that's a whole other conversation as to whether or not like someone should have to go explain their show. It's just the nature of the world right now. But you can tell her level of knowledge on Star Wars and her level of forethought is crazy. I loved the kind of the style and the specific voice for this show. It's kind of a overall thing. I hadn't really realized how much it would affect me being in a new era for Star Wars where you had no idea who's going to live and die. And then we saw some people die pretty majorly.
We saw a lot of people die.
Well, I mean, we let's talk about one of my favorite things. That whole episode 5. That's, if I'm honest with myself, that's my favorite one. My favorite one should...
I was on the fence about the show for the first 3 episodes. Episode 4, I was like, oh, now we're cooking with gas. Episode 5, I've completely flipped, you know?
Yeah.
I was like, this is fantastic.
I loved episode 4, too. I talked to some other buddies that were kind of like, I didn't really like this one. But I ate up all the character interactions in that episode in particular. Yeah. Obviously, go ahead.
Episode 5 proved to me that they did some good work in the beginning episodes too, because I was really on the fence about Yord, like the first 2 episodes. You know, like having his shirt off. You know, like he's like this bro-y kind of cop. You know, because like the first 2 episodes were very like, this is a cop procedural. And then when he, spoilers, dies, I was like, oh, I'm affected by that. Like, I care that he died. Like, oh my gosh. And in such a gruesome way, like, hands off to Disney, because I didn't think they were going to show that.
You're right. Like, and I mean, you are a bigger fan than me of stuff like Game of Thrones. So I'm very childlike in that way, where it's like, I don't like watching characters I like die. But I don't know of another time in Star Wars, at least on screen, in animation and live action, that we've seen characters that were secondary leads get like brutally and carelessly murdered. Just like, moving on, they're dead. And it as dark as it is to say, it was kind of refreshing in a way.
Yeah.
But I did the equivalent of the Leo snap point at the screen when they died. Well, for something else in that episode. But then when they died, when Jackie got killed, I screamed, stood up, paused the TV, and took a lap around my apartment. And I
had watched that episode late, so I had seen some spoilers of her next to like a 3-hole punch, which is hilarious.
Which is the best meme.
But like I knew it was coming that she was gonna die because I had saw some spoilers because people are crazy and they're like, hey, the episode's been out for 1 hour. Here's a meme. But I was still affected. I was like, oh, that's gruesome. But also, that saber is so cool.
Oh my!
Pulling the saber from the other saber.
Everything that they did with the aesthetic of the Stranger, I adored. I absolutely loved, and it was. Well, I'll just talk about it now. It kind of reminded me of. I was thinking about Darth Maul, in that the Stranger just the way.
Shirt.
Well done. I'm wearing a Rey Skywalker shirt, so there we go. Nice. We're balancing the Force. But it reminded me, we haven't seen really another Sith that's that full lethal, at least again on screen, other than Maul. But this was, if like you could deploy a Sith that was that lethal in a show of expendable red shirts, right? He's not going up against Jedi Masters and Obi-Wan Kenobi, who or at least Obi-Wan's going to make it out of this fight, like on Clone Wars and stuff, or in any of the prequels. This was against people where, like I was saying, the new era, anyone could die. There were moments where I was like, when the Stranger activated his lightsaber at the end of Episode 4, and he was face-to-face with Osha for the first time with his mask on.
Died too.
I thought he had ignited his saber through her.
Oh.
And I was like, did they just kill the main character halfway through the show? They didn't.
Yeah.
That would have been really metal, but they didn't. But anyway,
they have another one.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. They were like, well, let's make her life easy. She's going to have to play one character from here on out. But I just loved that it was a new era where anybody could go. You had no clue what was going to happen. I also loved the Jedi kung fu of it all.
And having Carrie-Anne Moss at the beginning too, just like amazing.
Well, and it's funny. I'm just old enough that I was 10 when Phantom Menace came out, and I remember I wasn't part of these circles because, like I said, I was 10. But there were a lot of Star Wars fans that saw the Phantom Menace and saw the Matrix and were frustrated that the Phantom Menace was not the Matrix. That it wasn't that level of, I guess,
serious.
Gritty and like serious and, for lack of a better word, badass or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I thought it was funny that here we are, 25 years later, and Trinity is in the opening action sequence of a Star Wars show.
Yeah.
And kind of setting the tone of, like you said, we're going to do Matrix-style wire work and more martial arts than you've seen in another Star Wars project. It did, as much as I loved the Jedi Kung Fu, it did kind of hit my brain in a weird way of, we have seen, Jedi punchy in fights before, but never to this degree where they've all clearly done, like, Kung Fu.
Yeah.
you know?
I feel like what we've seen is like, I don't know, coming from like combat background, like it's the like, oh, I am a sword fighter, and then like when I get in close, I'll punch you. This one, it's like, oh, we're gonna use our swords last and our fists as much as possible until.
Yeah.
Well, that's another thing. Sorry, I'm jumping around.
No, go ahead.
When they were like, oh, a Jedi only ignites their lightsaber when they mean to kill. I was like, that's really cool. Also, I think they lose that like 50 years down the line, like
yeah.
Because Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan Episode 1, smoke comes out and they're like, like
that is,
I'm gonna kill someone right now. Like
that is one of the stranger moments in that movie, where like you said, smoke enters the room and lightsabers are out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, and this is what we're going to do on this podcast. We're going to think too deep about things because that's fun. But maybe that does kind of exactly what you're saying point to kind of a flaw in the order at that point. They're a little more open to going straight to the laser sword and not as an absolute last resort. I like that. Yeah. That's cool. Or and you could also say that Qui-Gon was trained by a guy that turned into a Sith Lord not long after, so... It's a specific flaw. What were you going to say?
Speaking of flaws in the Order, I loved that the Order was flawed, even at the height of, this is the High Republic. It's the height of all Jedi civilization, and Coruscant looks exactly the same.
It is. There was a detail that I loved that only people like us would notice. But when they showed the exterior of the Jedi Temple, the rest of the city was not up to the same height that it is in the prequels. Yeah. So it's like the Jedi are almost getting swallowed up by all the corruption and all the politics and the machinations of everything going on Coruscant, but not quite yet. It hasn't quite got there, but it's coming. I loved that little tiny detail that, like I said, only people like us would ever notice or care about.
Yeah. Speaking of corruption, what are your views on Venestra?
Well, I am... This is jumping ahead, but we'll do it. I am fascinated by her character. Have you read any of the High Republic publishing
I've read a little
initiative?
bit of it, not anything that she's in, so I need to go back and...
Yeah. They introduced her early in Phase 1. I would love to tell you the name of the book, but I don't remember.
Yeah.
But I think they have a really, really interesting opportunity with her because they introduce her in one of the earliest books as kind of this like super prodigy Jedi. I don't necessarily remember if she's wildly more powerful, but she's very, very capable from a very early age. And if I remember right, this could be wrong. Please tell me in the comments or email us if I'm wrong. But I'm pretty sure she's knighted at something insane, like 16 years old.
Oh, wow.
Something wild. And then they make a point of that it's weird that she's advanced to the level that she has at this age. But she's very much like a paragon, like a super Jedi. And so then to show her on this show 50 to 100 years later, and so 100 years before The Phantom Menace, being a Jedi that is probably the most corrupted and the most... Corrupted is harsh. The most mired in politics and having to make such a flawed choice, I think is really, really interesting. And they could use that. They could literally use her character to show kind of the... I guess the erosion of the Jedi by the time we get to the prequels. Does that make sense?
Definitely. Well, and I don't know about corrupted, but she's definitely playing the company line. You know, like she's the company woman. You know, like, but yeah, I didn't love her character at the beginning. You know, well, I don't know if it's didn't love. I always was suspicious of her character. Like from moment one, I don't know if it was if it's the tattoos that like she has a lot of V, and in character design, a lot of sharp V's.
I didn't think about that.
End up being evil, right? Like when you're doing character design, round is good, triangle is bad. So she has a lot of triangles. It's all over her face. So I don't know if it was just that, or if she's like semi-reptilian. So you're automatically like, ooh, I don't know about this character. And then at the end, you're like, oh, yeah, she is different. And then she has a purple lightsaber too, which is like also, we've only ever seen one other person, and he uses Sith techniques. So it's like, I don't know. I guess they're doing a great job because I instantly was like, I don't know about you.
Well, and it's interesting. I did kind of struggle with her characterization in the first couple episodes because, like I should point out, I have read most of Phase 1 of the High Republic, and that's about what I've read. And they're on Phase 3 now. But
it's hard to keep up.
Yeah. To what I've read, she was presented, like I was saying earlier, as this very much like ultimate good, like Ahsoka style Jedi.
Yeah.
And then to see her being kind of snippy, unintentional Ahsoka reference, I guess, but being kind of like snarky and stuff, hit me as weird. But I think, I hope that they're going to use it as literally use her character as an opportunity to show the downward slide of the Jedi by the time we get to the prequels. But other likes that I had. Go ahead. Sorry.
Just a question about the comics, because I think it'll be interesting to people too. Do they explain why she has a whip? Or is that in the comics, or is it just like
it's in the novel that she's introduced in?
Okay.
If anybody doesn't know, what I was talking about with the publishing initiative, it's interconnected novels, young adult novels, and comic books telling the story of the High Republic, which I think it was it's 100 years before the ACOLYTE.
Yeah.
And then the ACOLYTE is 100 years before Star Wars Episode 1. So anyways, that's what I was talking about. But I think they introduce her light whip in her novel. and that it's like a
Gotcha.
weird and unique thing that she learned how to do that. That could be wrong, but it sounds cool, so we're going to say that's what it is right now. But other likes that I had, I too, shock, loved Chimere and The Stranger. I was just watching it, as we're both actors, nowhere near to their degree, but we are, or at least their exposure, but we are
Don't
actors.
put ourselves down. We're great.
Yeah, amen. Maybe one day we'll be in a Star Wars show. I just want to be a pilot that blows up. There's too many of them, and then I die. But what an actor's role, man. Chimere and The Stranger. I absolutely adored the idea of the dark side Clark Kent. I thought that was funny and cool and weird, and you could see straight through it if you're an adult, right? The first time that he came, when he was introduced in the trailer, and the first thing he says is the opening line of the Sith Code, that peace is a lie. I was like, well, that you're suspect number one, buddy. But I also thought maybe they're not. Maybe they haven't thought about it that much, and I was wrong.
No.
But then the first time that they established in those first 2 episodes how good May is with knives, and then Chimere is this bumbling dork, she goes to knife him, and he effortlessly evades her attack and disarms her. I was like, oh, okay, so he's the guy in the mask, for sure, right? 100%. But it's the Sixth Sense twist, right? If you are looking for the unpredictable, you probably found it. That's why they portrayed him as so dorky, and I loved that it was like if Palpatine wasn't, if he was able to present himself as a bumbling dork, if he wasn't needing to be a politician, it's just another way for Chimere to present himself to kind of really see where May's at, to get her guard down. In the 4th episode when they're on their hike or whatever, and he's asking her questions.
Yeah.
He's presenting himself as such a dork so that she won't think anything of him. I thought that was so cool. And I loved the way he manipulated Osha in the 6th episode.
Oh, fantastic.
It was very different. And what's your take on the scene where he gets her to break and truly admit why she didn't become a Jedi, that she failed? What's your take on him holding the lightsaber hilt to his chest? Was it the type of thing where he just kind of doesn't really believe she's capable of killing him? Or was he... I don't think he was necessarily willing to die. But how was he going to get out of that?
Yeah, I don't think he was willing to die, but at the same time, if she does kill him, he also wins.
How so?
She gives into her hate. She gives into her emotions. And Plagueis is in the cave behind him, so
Yes, yes. We will talk about that soon. Yeah, keep going.
So it's either way he wins, But I think he's in there, in her head, and it's like, she won't kill me,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, again, I wanted to talk about that moment. They did a lot of dialogue callbacks to other parts of the saga. Vernestra talking about a pupil of mine before he turned to evil. When Chimere, or the Stranger, I don't know what his real name is, when he says to Osha in that 6th episode, your anger betrays your emotions. Yeah. I really liked and that he said, I can't read your mind, but your anger betrays your emotions. It kind of makes you look at, or at least me, look at Vader and Luke in Return of the Jedi differently. And he's like, your thoughts betray you. Your feelings for them are strong, especially for sister. He's not necessarily reading his mind. He's able, he is, right? But he's able to, through what Luke's afraid of, truths are revealed. Yeah. And the same thing.
I didn't think about that.
I don't think Chimere's mask is a magic anti-force thing where Soul's like, take your mask off. And he's like, so you can read my thoughts? No.
Is that Magneto's helmet?
Yeah. Because I thought about that for a second. But then they, in my opinion, clarified it in the next episode where he's like, you're wondering how I can read your thoughts. I can't. I think that was... They're kind of interpreting, Jedi or Sith reading thoughts as not necessarily literally being able to see their mind or see their thoughts or whatever, but they can read their face, and when they connect to them, they can kind of get a sense for things, if that makes any sense. I don't know.
Speaking of the mask, too, I think having him be such a bumbling buffoon and then giving the mask a smile, amazing design. Because it has the like teeth, you know, and like he's always kind of like grinning, and he does such a great work with like the mask work of like following the lines of the mask, like in his movements.
When he
going back
snaps,
to like acting mask work,
yes. When he snaps to look at him at the end of that 4th episode, that was the first time that the show made me stand up and scream when they hit that cliffhanger. You knew it was coming, but yes, fantastic mask work. And about that mask, I adored that they established that it was a sensory deprivation mask. I thought that was so cool.
Which harkens back to Kanan.
Yeah. Yes.
When Kanan loses his sight, and then in Star Wars Rebels. When he loses his sight, and then he puts on the mask to help deprive it all, so he can focus in on the Force. I
didn't even think about that. That's dope.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, exactly. When he puts on the Temple Guard mask, so that he's just reaching it. Yeah. Well, and it's the back to 1977, the Obi-Wan Kenobi. Your eyes can deceive you. Don't trust them. But just the idea that he's choosing to cut himself off from his base senses to purely rely on the Force, and then it raised questions for me. Do we think, and I mean, and they could easily say this kind of retcon, but we've gotten so many Darksiders, especially in canon, that wear masks. Do you think would you be open to them kind of loosely retconning it as saying that this is a dark side technique? That it's not just that you look scary, that it's that you're choosing to put yourself in a sensory deprivation tank so that you can only rely on the Force.
Yeah, well, so is Revan canon? Is Revan
the
is
name
like loosely
was mentioned
canon, right?
in a reference book, so loosely.
Because otherwise you just have Vader and then you have Kylo.
Well, and the Knights of Ren and the Inquisitors go into battle with masks on. True. They take them off sometimes.
Yeah.
But
I don't think I would love for it to be a Sith technique with everyone except for Kylo, because I love the idea that it's Vader fanship. You know, like Vader had a cool mask, so I'm gonna have a cool mask.
Well, and I think
I think that's a great idea.
I think it could go either way. I think it could be not just that he's a fanboy, like we all like to say, but that he's Ben's, huh?
I just picture him being like, I can have a mask.
but I like the idea of Ben Solo being so conflicted that the only way he can find, I don't want to say peace because he's clearly not a character that's at peace, but find any steady ground to stand on is to put the mask on and just only reach out with the Force.
You know what that would really help? The reconstruction of the mask.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That would really help that whole plot point because, that's one of my biggest qualms with the last movie is like Rian Johnson was like, yeah, he's going to break this mask because he doesn't want to be a little kid in a mask. And then the next movie he's like, I need my mask.
Well, and the biggest reason the mask, this is a whole other conversation, but I like it, so let's go. The biggest reason the mask didn't bother me, him reforging it for episode 9, was the cracks. You see, and I mean, it was a little on the nose. I see the cracks in your mask. But but just to show, I mean, he's the villain. And he is fundamentally flawed. In my opinion, that works best when they are making transparently flawed choices. He is not able to reveal his true self, right? The problem is that then sometimes he takes the mask off. But it's only ever in the presence of Rey. Whenever he's around, if I remember right, whenever he's around other characters, he has the mask on until he becomes Ben Solo. But when it's Rey, she's the only person that he's willing to potentially step out of the sensory deprivation mask and try to connect with her.
Yeah.
You know, because it's Rey. But anywho, I loved the mask. I thought it was cool. Yes.
Segue back, we're talking about flawed characters. How do you... One thing that I've been bumping in. Is Chimera was like, oh, I went the wrong route with May. I went, I'm masked figure, blah, 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 evil man guy. Whereas with Osha, he's like, oh, here's who I really am.
Yes.
Do we think that's actually who he really is, or is he also throwing a mask up for her?
Well,
that's
cool. I do think. I think that he's being. It's what Darksiders always do, right? They tell the way I've kind of thought about it. They tell the truth, but it's seeded with lies, right? So he told his version of what I do think happened between him and Vernestra, where for whatever reason he didn't say it was Vernestra, but we know now because we watched the show.
Yeah.
That for whatever reason he was her student and it did not work out, and the way he sees it is she cast him aside. But he's also fantastic, like all Darksiders are. What he says is technically true, but he's gonna use semantics to twist the truth, right? So that's another reason I would love a season 2. I want to know what's happening. I want to know that story between him and Vernestra. But I think he's telling a truth. I do not think he is intentionally lying.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But other likes, bro. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay, I saw your mouth open. We got on-screen cortosis, and I ascended. I leveled up. That was the Leo meme, and I was freaking out. That is not something. Here's what's funny. Cortosis, what I will admit, was something that I always thought was stupid until this show. Because seeing it in comics and then reading about it in books, I was always like, what? It makes a lightsaber short out? That doesn't... I just, for whatever reason, my own biases, I always thought it was silly. And then I saw it visualized, and I went, oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So,
I remember, I think it's not the first canon appearance of it, though, because now I'm remembering it might have been in the Qui-Gon Obi-Wan book.
I don't remember if Cortosis was, but there was something else in the... It has appeared in canon in publishing.
Yes.
Cortosis has been in comics. It has been in the second Thrawn novel, Thrawn Alliances.
Yes. That's what it was.
Yeah. So it's been around, but it's the first time we've seen it visualized in motion.
Yeah.
And it won me over. It was I thought it was so cool the way they visualized that the lightsaber turned, like, it almost turned to smoke.
Yeah.
It didn't just short out. It wisps of it separated from the blade, and I just thought that was such a cool visual of you're reminded that it's plasma. It's a laser. It's not a sword. It didn't just turn off. It evaporated, and then it couldn't come back for a second. I thought that was so cool. Go ahead.
I also love that it's such a short time. It's just it gives you a couple of seconds, maybe not even a minute,
Yeah. Well, and we got to talk about, I've seen people complain about this and whatever, people complain about anything, but I loved that moment in the last episode where it was the classic saber lock, right? And then the stranger put his saber on the other side and was pulling Soul's lightsaber towards his helmet.
Yeah.
And so then it's a totally different type of problem to deal with. I thought that was so cool. So anyway, this is me shamelessly fanboying out. I'm a Cortosis fan now. I am a convert as of the Acolyte, and I thought it looked fantastic. We had another exact same Master Soul.
So great.
Li Zhangje, if we're saying it wrong, please correct us. I am so sorry. I'm dumb.
So sorry.
I apologize if I'm saying it wrong. I think they called him JJ I thought I saw that somewhere on set. So respectfully, so that we don't offend anybody, I might just call him JJ from here on out. But fantastic performance. I loved the character. I adored that he was so complicated.
Yeah.
And that you could see his affection for this kid, and it's a good want to protect this kid. Made him do some really questionable stuff, but I could see where he was coming from every step of the way. And that's another for the show. I could empathize with every character but one, but with basically every character
Who is the one?
that was on. We'll get there. I don't want to be too negative yet, but I loved that it was complicated, while really only villainizing actions, not necessarily people. I mean, with the exception of, in my opinion, it is still clear that the stranger is the villain, right? The Jedi are flawed, but the Sith are villains. I've seen a lot of people saying, this show proves that the Jedi are flawed and broken and evil and the Sith are right. And I'm like, I don't think anybody thinks that.
I don't know. He killed like 15 people in that one episode. So.
But
just indiscriminately.
Exactly. Well, and I loved that argument. I was defending my right to exist and all that stuff. I thought that was all so cool. But I just loved Master Soul, top to bottom. I want more stories of him. I want a whole comic book run of Soul and Endara going on adventures in the High Republic. That would be great. I would sign up for it now. But then a couple other small things, 2 more small likes, and then we'll actually move on to the negatives, the respectful negatives. But live action crystal bleeding.
Oh,
it was phenomenal.
Yes, I was about to bring that up too. Amazing.
Like
I saw somebody went into episode 3 and edited Anakin killing all the younglings, and as he let his thing, it bled when he goes to kill the kids, and I was like, that's cool, let's do that, retcon it.
But let's talk about that for a second, because I saw a lot of people complained, and I did too initially.
Yeah.
Because I'm stupid, and I didn't see that they clearly showed you that the hilt broke and the crystal was poking out, and she was able to make contact with it. Yeah, I'm dumb. I didn't see that. And I like that we got to see, because they've introduced kyber crystal bleeding in canon. That is a purely canon
for sure.
thing. In Legends, it was the crystal was synthetic. Which is cool because it's doubling down on the dark side being unnatural, but it just I like this so much more in that it's so much more personal, emotional, and that they have to. The dark side is all about wounding things for your own benefit, and that kyber crystals are, to some degree, sentient things that you have to hurt, that you put into pain. You put your pain into it, and that's what makes it bleed and turn the blade red. But to just see that visualized, I thought was phenomenal.
Yeah, also, just going back to the Anakin of it all, if Anakin had, his wouldn't be red. They've kind of established that, too. Because, so if you bleed somebody else's crystal, it has to be somebody else's crystal to become red. Like, that's why Vader in that comic run, has to go and get that other Jedi Masters and bleed the crystal, because then it is truly red. I think it's even like more metal of being like, oh, I'm taking something from somebody else and I'm corrupting it to my side, which is inverse how we get the white sabers for Ahsoka, because she purifies red crystals. But with the Ahsoka show, we saw Balin and his Padawan
Shin.
And Shin, they have orange, and we also saw it in Jedi Survivor, the video game. That character, that villain, he bleeds his own crystal. He pours his hate into his own crystal, and it creates a very dark orange blade. And that's why they have those orangish blades. So if you bleed your own crystal, it gets kind of orangey. If you bleed somebody else's crystal, it gets red.
That's cool. I did not know this. Well, because I do have a blind spot. I have not played Jedi Survivor. I might.
It's so good.
Nothing to do with Star Wars, but I just found out that you can create a team in NCAA 25, and I was like, son of a... It was a very sad realization that I'm going to spend that ungodly amount of money to be able to create teams in college football.
Yeah. Jedi Survivor is worth it. It's such a fantastic piece of media.
I just have a hard time. I mean, I'd spent all the money in the world to go to Disney World and Universal Studios earlier this year, but anyway, neither here nor there. Me choosing whether or not I'm going to spend $500 on pure
Get in
fun.
the comments. Tell them to get Survivor.
Hey, if we get a Patreon and y'all give enough money, maybe we can use the profits from the show for me to get a PlayStation. Okay, it's purely self-serving. Anyway, neither here nor there. So saber bleeding is amazing.
Yes.
All that to say. That's cool.
And to see
I didn't
it
realize
happen down the blade was really cool.
Yes. I started to say this earlier where saber bleeding comes from, if I remember correctly. The first time we saw it was in the Darth Vader comics written by Charles Soule. Charles Soule was he was either a producer or executive producer on this show. I don't remember.
Oh, cool.
But for him to work on the
writer.
show, that came from just like he writes what I'd want Star Wars to be. He's very much in the Dave Filoni, Jon Favreau vibe, where it is faster, more intense. It's a Western. It's usually very clear and mythical, his stories.
Yeah.
But anyway, I loved that he got to work on a show that did that, but also I liked that in that Vader comic that we've talked about a couple times now, it's a whole quest, and Vader has to overcome some of what he would see as his demons of his light side stuff to bleed the crystal. Osha just gets mad. And just in that moment of releasing, it turns red. I didn't get the first time I watched the finale, because I'm stupid. I didn't really comprehend Osha's character arc in that the first time on the show, really, maybe one of the first times in her life that someone, or one of the first couple, that someone gives her permission to do what she wants is Soul saying it's okay to kill him. And then the first time anybody asks, what do you want, or at least the first time since her mom said, do you want to join the Jedi, is towards the end of the show when May says to her, what do you want to do? What do you want? She's never had that opportunity. It is just so heartbreaking that, because I read Soul saying I'm sorry as him giving her permission to kill him. Because there's a lull in the Force choke. It looks to me like a moment of indecision. It reminded me of Kylo and Han. Yeah. Right? Where you're like, what is he going to do it? Which way is this going to go? And then Soul says it's okay, and then she pours it on and kills him. But
do you think it's a Force choke?
Well, so that's interesting. Let's talk about that. The whole I got caught up.
Must kill a Jedi without a weapon.
Without a weapon. I got caught up in all the speculation of like, what does that mean? Is it going to be like she's going to destroy? I think it's shout out Star Wars Explained. I think it was that channel. They talked a lot about, is it going to be a political death? Are they going to reveal what Soul did? And that's going to be like the killing of his credibility. You're killing him without a weapon, right? And it's going to bring the Jedi down. It wasn't. It was just a Force choke, dog. But I thought that was interesting in that it points to how I think the Force works, where it is not powers that you turn on and off. It's not just, I'm going to choose to constrict his neck with the Force. It's, I think it is not necessarily a specific power, but it is a specific thing that you're doing to kill someone with just the Force.
Yeah.
And I like that it kind of framed it as a special thing for people to be able to do. You know? That is next level hatred and power, just ability to wield the Force, or, you know, depth of your pain. That that you can cut someone off. And so to ask, is it Force choke? I have some speculation.
Yeah.
What if, and this is weird, what if it's not choking off the airway? What if it is what you're literally doing is cutting off the midichlorian's ability to, like, communicate in your body? You're literally choking off the Force.
I think that's a great idea, except
is it weird
that Luke cuts himself off from the Force in the sequel series.
I guess that's true.
I thought it was like a constriction of his heart. That's what I got from it. That she was like not... Well, it's interesting too because she doesn't do like the Vader choke. You know, she's just like looking at him.
But she does. She kind of squeezes her hand a little bit. It's not as full on like Vader, like, you know.
Yeah. But I viewed it as like her like constricting his like chest, his like, because he's like this, and then he's
yeah.
I viewed it as a internal like heart kalima.
Oh gosh. Well, either way, I like that they framed it as more than just the force choke power that you activate in video games sometimes. It is the ability to kill someone with just the force without any type of projectile weapon. There's no lightning here. Yeah. It's just, I'm going to kill you with the force.
So much so that May doesn't even think about it.
Yeah. Yeah,
May
right?
isn't like, oh, I'll just use the force. You know, like, she's like, what do you mean? You know?
Yeah. And I like that Kymir treats it as a riddle. Like, he's asking her when they're on their wilderness hike, how are you going to do that? How are you going to kill him with a weapon? Like, how does that work?
Because if you look at it that way, and it is a riddle, it's like, oh, that's such a, total corruption of the force as well,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yes, exactly. Yeah. Anyway, I loved that. I thought that was cool. And then my last positive, it's stupid. I absolutely loved that there were new, weird, strange, ridiculous aliens that don't make sense.
Oh, Basil is instantly top 10 creatures for me.
But even the weird dude with, like, the tentacle forehead, like, we have to remember that in the first Star Wars movie, it's not all these amazing metal aliens. There's a guy in a werewolf mask.
Oh, Werewolf Man is also top 10 for me.
You know what I mean? Like, it's just and then there's a guy that none of the aliens make sense, and some of them are stupid. Just clearly in Halloween masks, and I want that. I think that's so
This guy is in a devil costume.
Literally,
ACOLYTE
this guy just has devil horns.
We see a green guy with a scar and deadbolts in his neck.
Let's go. Give me Star Wars Frankenstein. Absolutely. I think that's important, that we cannot forget. Like, yes, sure, let's do more Andor where it's like adult, prestige, Emmy bait television. But give me some goofy aliens that are kind of ridiculous and can just make me laugh and then move on.
Yeah.
But okay, so we just raved about how much we like the show for nearly an hour. So now let's get into some respectful dislikes of the show. What did you struggle with? What were some dislikes? So take them away, Zach.
I struggled with the pacing of the show a lot at the beginning. The first two, I mean, a lot of people I know have been like, oh, it's boring. Like, they do a lot of setup, and it's a lot of exposition, and, like, you have to, right? Like, you got to show this world and what's going on. But it felt a little too cop procedural at the beginning of, like, okay, and there's a murder, and we're going to go and find clues. And, like, it just needed to move a little bit quicker, because a lot of people I know that are, like, casual fans are like, yeah, I fell off of it. And I have to be like, wait, we have to watch episode 5. And they're like, I don't know. I'm like, no, you have to watch it. So I think that's a big flaw for me. I really bumped into when Carrie-Anne Moss takes the Force out of Torben, with the black eyes and all that. Or it's not Torben, it might be Soul. No, it's Wookiee. It's Kalnaka.
Yes.
At the end, and all the witches die for some reason. Really bumped into that.
Yes.
Really hugely. I thought the witches were really cool. It's a that we didn't talk about. I thought they were fantastic. I thought that
my God, I forgot. Mother Anastasia.
Mother
Such
Anastasia
a cool character.
Freaking amazing. Excuse me. Freaking amazing. We'll cut that out. Freaking amazing. I thought she was so good. I thought that actress is amazing, and the depth of her. I mean, you look at her eyes and, like, the loss of her child. I thought she was amazing. The Zabrak mother, whatever her name was in the show, Mother Coral. I thought she was an interesting character as well. But I felt like they underutilized a lot of the witches. Like, I wanted a little bit more knowledge into their culture, because May's like, oh, we're fighting for this culture, we're fighting for our way of life, we're fighting for our witches, and then it's like, yeah, I mean, you guys, like, live on a planet, and you do a moon thing, which is pretty
And there's
cool.
no dudes for some reason,
And
which is cool.
yeah, it's great. Dudes suck.
We tend to be the worst. It's true.
And like, it's cool that you're creating life. I'm sure they'll go into that in the next, hopefully in the next season, of like how May and Osha were created. But I wanted a little bit more about their culture and and I guess we can get that in other places. I'm sure there'll be novels or some such, but I just wanted a little bit more, and I wanted it to be a little bit more specific. I almost wanted there to be less technology, or I don't know. I wanted more witches. I wanted more witches. So
Wanted more witches. Yeah. I pushed back on the exact same moment. It was kind of something. My biggest whiny criticism was that they kept major moments ambiguous. I think in general, this is a franchise that, and things can always grow and change and evolve, but it's a fairy tale, and Star Wars is. And most of this franchise tends to celebrate and like champion clarity, where whether or not someone
how much hate has Dave Filoni gotten for being like, is Ahsoka alive?
Oh, yeah, that's fair.
For years.
That's
we
fair.
need to know.
That's fair. It's like, and then he wears the Ahsoka Lives t-shirt. Well, that's not necessarily what I mean, but that like whether or not a character is a hero or villain, you know why they're doing what they're doing, and you understand what is happening in the situation. And when the show this season hinged very much on what the Jedi did on Brendok, and that it was really bad, and you're hearing it was terrible, and they keep that mystery up until the penultimate episode, only to find out that, like you said, she cuts off the witch's connection to the Wookiee, and they all just die. If we're gonna treat it as the Jedi really, really screwed up, you could have made it something where she has a choice to make. It's either Kelnaka dies or the witches die, and she chooses the witches. And if they said that and I missed it, then I apologize for being stupid. But it was just kind of like, wait, that's how they had an opportunity to make the Jedi a little more villainous, and in my opinion, justify why 2 Jedi, for all intents and purposes, left the Order in Torben and Kelnaka. And Soul is so... I mean, I understand why Soul was conflicted. We all do. But it seemed like more of a happenstance. And I loved everything they did with Soul, with the exception of... I'm sorry. He was justified...
The bridges?
Huh?
Are you doing the bridges?
That didn't bother me, because I don't think the Force works as simply as I'm going to catch the kids and not the bridge. I think you just reach out. It's emotional. It's not like... It's the same reason Obi-Wan doesn't force speed to Qui-Gon in Episode 1. It doesn't work like that. You know what I mean? But, so I didn't push back against that, but I... Like, when he kills Anastasia, if you wanted to make it a moment where he reacted too harshly towards something that was happening, maybe don't have her turn into a long-fanged black smoke monster, and he's also seeing a child that he wants to protect also turning into black smoke. That looks like something bad is happening. And I understand that's the point that they were making of, like, sometimes the Jedi react too fiercely. It's like, well, yeah, she's turning into, like, a demonic thing. And from all he knows, everybody's talking really loud in this moment, and things are getting really stressful and elevating. And then she starts to turn a kid to dust. The lightsaber's coming out. I'm sorry. You know what I mean? They could have done that in a way, in my opinion, what that moment is, I think, supposed to be, is you're going, oh, why did you do that, buddy? That was not necessary. And I was going, I mean, that looked pretty messed up. He's trying to save a child who, while, you know, you can definitely make the argument they shouldn't be trying to save in the first place.
Right.
I just didn't think that villainized him enough. I love that then in the next moment, you know, Coral is kicking his ass, and he's just taking it. Yeah. Because he knows that he screwed up, and he's not going to continue to be violent But also, that same moment, keeping it ambiguous, I loved the tragedy of it. I loved that this was a tragedy. But he stabs Anastasia, and then she's like, she was going to go with you. She chose you. It's like, bro, lead with that next time, man.
Right? Be like, yeah, hey, it's cool.
But yeah, that was a major dislike for me, that those two moments, Indara killing the witches, like you said, and that they, in my opinion, justified maybe too much Soul reacting violently. It just because it looked like archetypal gothic horror, what she was turning into. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I understand that's what the show's playing on. They're trying to play on your preconceived notions about good and evil and everything else, but it looked scary, and I thought he was justified in stabbing her. So I talked about this earlier, that I loved and understood why everybody did everything, with the exception of May. I thought May was borderline like just psychotic at times. It was just like, why did your allegiance change that much on a dime? They kept consistent that all she ever wanted was to live with the witches and to live with Osha.
Yeah.
And I loved in episode 4 when she turns on Chimera in a moment, as soon as she realizes that Osha is there and she's alive. She's like, yeah, great, I don't care. I want to be with my sister. I thought that was super cool. Yeah. But she just, then when they do the dichotomy switch of, in the last episode now, Osha is in black and May is in white, and it's like they've switched sides, right? I was like, what exactly about May is light side right now? Like, I don't understand really what you're going for. She's not being very light side.
Yeah, she killed Pip.
Yeah, they didn't make a big enough thing about that, in my
Justice
opinion.
for Pip.
Justice for Pip. But I didn't really get...
Osha didn't even ask about Pip.
Well, didn't she?
She really is evil.
Didn't she at one point when they're fighting in the finale? Where, I don't know.
Yeah.
But May, I just couldn't really follow where she was at a lot of the time. And I don't know, maybe they'll get into it in a season 2 of Osha and May being the same person means that, like, May's just unhinged and Osha is like the hinged side of the personality.
Yeah.
I don't know. That doesn't make any sense. But
or maybe if because they're two sides of the same person, if one goes light, the other has to go dark. Maybe it's a balance thing.
It could be, but either way, it just didn't work for me. I
also feel like the ending of that, like, I feel like they needed another 20 minutes on the end of that last episode to fully flesh out the May and the Osha of it all. Because she's just like, I'm gonna go with her, and then you let my sister go, and it's like, oh, okay, oh, we're going quick. Like, all right.
That hit me weird too on like my first watch, and then I rewatched it and I was like, oh, okay. And what made it stick the landing for me was when when May says to Osha, "What do you want?"
Yeah. And
anything that she wants is okay, and she has never really had that from anybody. And so, and Chimere's getting out of there with an apprentice, and they both know that. Some either, or they're both going to die, right? At least that's how I interpreted it. So she says, okay, if you let her live, I will choose to go with you. Because also he's letting her express her emotions, which while she's choosing evil, she's getting to exist freely, which is kind of what the show was meditating on, right?
The Jedi.
This is about who has power
fighting
and who
for
gets to use it.
Yeah. And he's fighting for his right to live.
Yeah. And that is, she says, what do you want at one point? And he says, to use my power the way I like.
Yeah.
You know. Anyway. But the only other thing with May that I just didn't vibe with, and I don't know, they might do amazing things with it if we get back to these characters, but the memory loss ending I thought was a major cop-out. Like, it was tragic, but it just didn't, it seemed needlessly complicated as opposed to something as harsh but, like, I guess efficient as she has to die. You know what I mean? Or something like that. But just like, nope, I'm going to take your memory now.
I have to keep them alive. and I'll tell you why. It'll probably get us into our next talking point. But to me, this show, at the end, I was like, oh, I understand what the show is. The show is the tragedy of Darth Plagueis, how he learns to create life. Like, that's why he wants one of them, but Soul, in I think in the last episode or one of the episodes, he's like, oh, if we have both you and May, then we can show the Jedi that you are a, force being created, and we can prove it because there's both of you and you're both the same person. So like I feel like I don't know if thematically they can kill May, because I think Plagueis needs both of them to learn how to create life and how to get that whole beginning part of the tragedy of Darth Plagueis.
Well, and that's the rhyme that they say, I give you, you give me. What was it? Always one, but born as two, or something like that.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense. I wasn't necessarily saying that they should have killed her.
No. I'm just saying. I think that's why they. Yeah.
We'll see. Okay, but well, let's get to the Plagueis of it all. So if anybody doesn't know, if somehow you are unaware who that guy was, that like Gollum-looking dude in the cave, it has been confirmed.
Flat-nosed Bill. Oh, it has.
Yes.
He's got a flat nose,
I think StarWars.com posted something that was Darth Plagueis.
Cool.
And you can say that like you would love them to clarify that on the show, but it would have just slowed. They got too much to do. They had 8 episodes to tell a story. But if anybody doesn't know, that is Darth Sidious's master, Palpatine's master, and in Legends, he is arguably responsible for the creation of Anakin Skywalker. Plagueis and Sidious.
Another Force being.
Yes. Which is another thing I'm about to talk about. But that in a great Star Wars novel that is Legends, Darth Plagueis is what it's called. Palpatine and Plagueis, like, it's weird. They meditate and pull the balance of power to the dark side. They do this specific thing. They literally just kind of like tip the scales the other way in like to a major degree. And I think they say it's something that hasn't been that far in like a long time. And they do that 9 years before Star Wars Episode 1. And Plagueis is still around during that movie. Palpatine, and then he sees Anakin Skywalker, feels his strength in the Force, and does some math. And is like, oh God, I think the Force made him to push back against what we did. We brought it out of balance, and the Force is going to correct that, because balance is on the light side. But we'll get there. It's another whole other conversation. And so that's, if I remember correctly in Legends, that's the only life that he was ever actually responsible for making. And they kind of imply that he didn't literally do it. The Force did. So that's what all that is. Sidebar, I just think this is an amazing detail. I saw a quote from Leslie Headland, the showrunner of this show, that she said she had planned that if they were going to introduce Plagueis, they were going to do it in the exact shot that they did. This is just next level nerdiness. They wanted it to be his hand reaching out of the cave like that. She was like, because with Muns or Munes, however you pronounce it, with his species, their fingers are longer beneath the knuckle than above the knuckle, and so I wanted to show that hand. And you're like, oh, is that a Mune? It's Plagueis. And I was like, that is the most ridiculous. Like, go outside. Like, that's cool.
That's what we need, all right?
Yeah, at the same time, nerd props. Like, okay, I trust you. You are one of us. Like, well done. I just wanted to talk about that. But that is the Darth Plagueis of it all.
Yeah.
And
well, now you're setting up Plagueis and Yoda at the end. Not that they'll ever meet, because if they do, then the Jedi are really lying about, it's the first in 1,000 years.
Well, and that would be, yeah, I'm going to talk about quote-unquote canon contradictions in a minute. But if it was ever revealed that Yoda knew and was straight up lying, I would, that would bother me. I could roll with it, because he does not discount that they could be Sith in Episode 1. He says
hard to see the dark side is.
There's my terrible Yoda for you. Mace and Kiadi are like, it's not a Sith, it's impossible. And Yoda's like, could be. But Yoda might come across somebody because he knows about the rule of two.
Oh, true.
And there's a goofy...
Chimera knows about the rule of two, too.
Yes.
Because she asks what you want, and he goes, the rule of two.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, so casually.
I think, and I want to know your thoughts, I think that it is pretty straightforward that Chimera is Plagueis' apprentice, current one, and he's seeking an acolyte to overthrow his master. Like it's a Asajj Ventress situation.
Yes.
Where Sidious was like on Clone Wars, where he's like, okay, Dooku, I see what you're doing. Get rid of her. And then same thing, Vader and Luke.
No,
together,
she's just an assassin. It's fine.
And Sidious like,
she's a Sith assassin.
Yeah. But I think that's what it is. What are your thoughts?
I think it's either that or he's playing her to get her to Plagueis because he wants to know how she was created.
Oh yeah, I mean, well, to that said,
I think it's partially in Plagueis' plan.
Okay, I could see that. Do you think Chimera is actually he actually has feelings for her, or is that all just a ploy?
That's what I was wondering earlier. What your thoughts were, because he was like, oh, and he's a very attractive man who, he's like, hey, I'm naked in the water, like he's definitely playing her. I mean, look at those arms, but
I'm saying, like, you want to talk about the cosplay? They're so cruel because that's one of the easiest cosplays you could do if you're ripped.
If you're not, the arms.
If you don't have the arms, don't do that. Don't embarrass yourself.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? It's like, oh, we're so close and yet so far. Okay.
I think he might be playing her a little bit. So I think it can go two ways. He's either playing her and it's all under Plagueis' plan, or he's manipulating Plagueis' plan and being like, oh yeah, no, I'll bring her to you, and then we're gonna kill you. Like we're gonna overthrow you. But I will say he's the one person that we know has to die from the show. Chimera has to die because Palpatine is his apprentice. And he's not Palpatine.
This is assuming that Chimera is his apprentice, because I got a what if to throw at you. He does say, and Soul's like, "Who are you?" He's like, "I have no name, but a Jedi you might call me Sith." Now, the wild, irresponsible speculation, chaos theory that I had from shortly after when I first saw The Stranger's Mask. The silhouette of that mask is, with the exception of the smile, is almost identical to Kylo Ren's. Is he the first Knight of Ren?
Oh, maybe.
And he doesn't even know about Plagueis, and Plagueis is just, like, spying and kind of waiting for this whole situation to...
But why is he in the cave?
Because he's spying on him.
Yeah.
And Chimera doesn't even know. Because does he ever say that he has a master?
No.
Yeah. Well, it could go either way. I hope it's cool.
Yeah. Either way, it's going to be cool.
Yes. Well, okay. So, now, I want to talk about... I mean, this show wasn't controversial at all. Everything was great. Everyone was united and everybody loved it. But let's talk about the controversies. So, does it break canon? And my answer is no. The weird thing is it doesn't break Legends either. I saw a lot of stuff about people claiming that this show was broken because the Sith have purely remained in hiding for 1,000 years, and that wasn't even true in Legends. Darth Bane, the guy who started the Rule of Two and started the plan of hiding, 10 years into him and his apprentice hiding, whose name I can't remember right now, they fight and kill like 5 Jedi Masters 10 years into hiding. Yeah. And there are other evidences of that, especially in Legends. There were lots of dark Jedi and fallen Jedi every now and then that would have red lightsabers That does not mean that they are Sith. And they make that distinction on the ACOLYTE. In the scene with Ki-Adi-Mundi that everybody got mad about, they assume it's a fallen
Star
Jedi.
Wars Episode 1 pod racing game or something like that said that he was this age.
All right. So let's talk about the Ki-Adi-Mundi age discrepancy that broke canon. The source for Ki-Adi-Mundi's age was a behind-the-scenes making-of CD-ROM for Star Wars Episode 1.
That's what
which
it was, yes.
was the lowest level of canon in Legends. For people that don't know, current canon, since the Disney buyout, everything plays, at least as much as possible. It definitely contradicts, but they try to keep everything in line. In Legends, which was all the storytelling from, 1977 through, I think it was like mid-2014, it was so contradictory all the time that they literally had tiers of canon. So because Ki-Adi-Mundi had like 4 wives in the comic books. And then the prequels came out and they were like, whoops, we guess Jedi don't get married. And then they had to retcon. It was retconned all the time. But this was literally from a level of canon that nothing else had to acknowledge. It has never been canon that he was too young to be around at this time. It was wild that everybody got mad about that. But also, I love that he was...
It couldn't... They never call him by name, if I'm not mistaken.
I mean, but they've said it's Ki-Adi-Mundi. It's the same thing they say on StarWars.com.
They could have just been like, it's not Ki-Adi-Mundi. It's another guy.
I loved that he was in that scene because everybody was like, well, he would know. It's like, he wouldn't know. He never even found out about the stranger. Everybody died. Yeah. He never found out about anybody that had a lightsaber. He saw a Force-sensitive assassin with knives. There is no reason in the world for him to assume that is a Sith. They have no record of a Sith for the last 900 years. And I loved that he was in that scene because it showed, you want to talk about the show showing the folly of the Jedi, that nobody in that room for a moment considered it was a Sith. They're like, yes, it must be a fallen Jedi. Or taught by a fallen Jedi. They don't even think they could be a Sith Lord. And I loved that because that's kind of the point. They are so convinced. And but I saw a lot of criticism.
They're almost more like it's like a Inquisitor level, like not somebody who can do crazy Sith stuff. They've red lightsabers.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. But there was a lot of weird criticism levied at the show of the Jedi said that the Sith haven't been around for 1,000 years, and it's an easy one for me. They're shown to be wrong in that movie. So, what are people even mad about? I couldn't tell you. So, now something's worth talking about. In your opinion, does the creation, because this also got a lot of hate thrown its way. In your opinion, does the creation of the twins in whatever way that they were created, still ambiguous, does that lessen the importance of Anakin Skywalker?
No.
Why?
I mean, so if Anakin is a creation of he is a creation of the Force, but if it's like the Force trying to correct an imbalance, why wouldn't it have done it before? You know?
Yeah.
This could be the first attempt being like, hey, it's a little out of balance. Maybe I'll create a being and throw it out there, see if it works. Somebody made that person into 2. We'll try again.
Yeah, I mean...
That person took my balanced being and put them into 2 different people. That's not balanced. Crap.
Oh no, restart. Get out more midichlorian Play-Doh to make more people. Yeah, I mean, it's... All that is canon about Anakin being the chosen one is that there was no father, which so far as we know is the same with the witches on Brendok. They haven't said that. But all that we know is that there was no father and that there was a prophecy.
They kind of said that there was no father.
Did they?
Yeah, so because Mother Coral is like, I carried them, you created them.
You're right. You're so right.
What are we going to do when the Jedi figure out how you created them,
Okay, so they've said that they both share in common that there was no father, but that all that we know that's special about Anakin is that he didn't have a dad, and that when Qui-Gon says it is possible that he was conceived, right? Conceived by the midichlorians, the Jedi look at each other and they're like, you refer to the prophecy of the one who will bring balance to the Force. What they did not say is you refer to the prophecy of the one who will bring balance to the Force, and as we know, that has never happened anywhere else in the history of this galaxy. They don't say that. They just know that there's a prophecy about a particular one. And then if you want to read in, like, other canon material, Qui-Gon is obsessed with prophecies, much to the chagrin of other Jedi. So they're like, oh my God, will you quit bringing up prophecies all the time? So I don't think that is inconsistent, and I don't think that cheapens Anakin. It recontextualizes it a little bit, I suppose, but I also think it's possible that, because the witches, they never made clear on the show how the twins were created. I think it's possible that Plagueis did it.
Oh.
Now, I don't know that they'll necessarily do that, because I could see this becoming a thing where they don't want to take something away from new characters and say, it's somebody you already knew that did it. But I think that it could be a reveal, not to the level of, like, I am your father, but that type of thing.
Like Palpatine was supposed to say it in Episode 3, like.
Well, and that's why I brought up what happens in Darth Plagueis. Like, I think the line in that final draft was something like, you could say, I am like your father, or something like that. You could say, I am your father. And somebody talked to George and was like, dude, no. Like, please don't. You're like, all right, fine, we won't do it.
Oh, but it's like poetry, it rhymes.
It's like poetry, it rhymes. Literally. But I think that's possible. And I think that could be an interesting way to go if it turns out that Plagueis was behind it all along.
Yeah.
But I also like if it's just a happenstance thing that he stumbles upon and he's like, this is what I've been wanting. Because that was the other thing in Legends. The whole thing is Plagueis was obsessed with immortality. He was obsessed with living forever, which were all his midichlorian experiments. But, okay. Cool. So I think we've talked about our likes, we've talked about our dislikes, we've talked about some of the hate that we don't necessarily agree with. What are your kind of closing thoughts? Anything else you want to say about the Acolyte?
Closing thoughts. Curious to see what Yoda does about it all. You know,
yes.
Love that he was a puppet. I hope there's a season 2. I think I thought it brought a lot to the universe. It was a new, fresh view on the universe, which is always, great to have. I love the style of the show and all of the influences that it had. I think Lee Jung-jae deserves an Emmy.
Hard agree.
As well as maybe maybe Amanda Stenberg too.
Sure.
But I think he really is the spotlight of this. And I'm excited for season 2. It's gonna happen. I'm just gonna put it out in the universe that it will happen.
And believe.
Right. So that's my closing thoughts.
Yes. Hard agree on pretty much all those things. I also want a season 2. I think that they did a really good job of what Rebels did and Mandalorian did and Force Awakens did to a degree of you introduce brand new characters and you let them play out a lot of their story before you drop them into kind of the wider galaxy and how it fits into everything else. Like, Force Awakens, you meet Finn and Rey and it's about a half hour before Han Solo shows up. Rebels, Ahsoka doesn't show up till the end of season 1. Spoilers for Rebels, I guess. You know what I mean? That, like, you meet these new people, you find out what they're about, and then as you've gone on a journey with them, then they enter the larger world. Leslie Headland said that originally the last shot of season 1 was Plagueis reaching out of the cave and staring out after them and stuff. And they didn't want to do that because she didn't want to take away from Osha's triumph. Dark as it is, her triumph. She has freedom now, or she thinks she does. But I'm really, they have made this show into, by introducing Plagueis, in my opinion, they have made this show a story that needs to continue, because this is a story that we need, and we don't need anything. It's all fun make-believe. But I think we need this in Star Wars. I want to know what Plagueis did in the canon interpretation of his character. I want to know how he fits into this. I think that there's all types of fun things they could do for Season 2. They could make it that not only is this how Plagueis learns how to create life, this could be how Palpatine learns about a Force dyad, which is a very, very rushed, in my opinion, kind of strange, fun, but strange, just kind of by the way, introduction in Rise of Skywalker. Well, no, you don't understand. We're a dyad. What's that mean? Don't worry about it. We got a movie to tell. It's like, what?
Look, no, they had 2 movies to tell, so.
And they didn't even. But this could be that, the power of 2, right? I want the power of 2. And that line was said in Rise of Skywalker. The power of 2 restores the 1. And unseen for generations. You could do a Force dyad. I also think that if you're going to have a story that is about someone, Osha, finding peace, finding triumph, finding victory by choosing the dark side, I think you have a duty to show that the Sith version of happiness only leads to ruin. I think that you have to continue that story. Because I don't want, and it's just a personal, whiny
It's going to bring up the Grey Jedi or debate again.
Yeah, but we're going to do, I would love to do a whole episode about Grey Jedi, because I think that it is an important thing to talk about. At least in the way that, I think we interpret the Force. But I think you have a duty to show that it does not lead to, just fundamentally does not lead to peace or happiness. So I want a Season 2. The show had its blemishes. It had its flaws, for sure. But everything does. And I don't think... Please don't make this a Solo, where at best we get Kira stuff in comics, which if we start to get a bunch of publishing featuring these characters, they did announce a couple prequels at San Diego Comic-Con. But if we start to get a bunch of publishing that in my opinion, points to they're not going to continue this. Because when everything's canon, they want to leave the doors open, right? So anyway, those are my thoughts on ACOLYTE Season 1.
Nice.
Woo!
We did it.
We did it. We did an episode. 10 years in the making. Okay. So before we do our happy little send-off, I want to let people know how you can get in touch with us. You can email the show at forceofothersradio@gmail.com. If you have any questions about anything, preferably Star Wars related, because this is in fact a Star Wars podcast, reach out and we will answer them on the show. If it's a good question.
Yeah.
Or if we have time. But no, we really want to get some fan engagement going. You can also find us on Instagram and I refuse to call it X. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter at Force of Others. So, and then, you can find me on Instagram and stuff at Matt Beutner. Zach, where can they find you online?
I'm on Instagram at Zachisfaction, like satisfaction with the A, Zach in the front.
I've been meaning to ask you what Zachisfaction meant. That is awesome. Okay, keep going. I'm sorry.
I was was an actor on a cruise show, and we had a show called Satisfaction, Rolling Stones show. And the final show, we all sang, "I can't get no Zachisfaction."
You did that in an actual performance?
We'll get into it later.
Wait.
You can't tell.
Cool.
You can't tell.
That's awesome. Okay, but they can find you at Zachisfaction. Is that on Twitter and Instagram?
Yes. Instagram, I think I'm on Twitter, but I'm really not on Twitter.
Oh, okay.
If you want to reach out to me, I won't answer.
I'm pretty sure the show account follows you, just for the sake of expanding our horizons. But we'll start tweeting eventually. We haven't yet. You could see our first tweet soon. Okay. Zach, do you have a list of the things that we're loosely planning on talking about next week?
Yeah. Plans for the show. When Skeleton Crew comes out, I'm sure we'll do an episode by episode Jude Law Love Fest. I think next week we're gonna do all the news that came out of San Diego Comic-Con.
Yeah.
Maybe even talk about Star Wars Outlaws, the new video game that's coming out, because they have released some of the new footage there. Eventually I would love to, down the line do a comics corner or a canon corner or hey, we reread all of Phase 1 of High Republic. Here's what you really need to know.
Yeah.
This is what happened. This is what's going on with the Jedi.
That's a bold claim. I do want to, that is something that the show will do, I can promise. We will, whether it's synopses or deep dives, I want to keep talking about all the storytelling that we're getting. And every time there's a show, I can guarantee that that'll be what we talk about that week. But yeah, we'll keep up with it as much as we can. We're both old and we have jobs. I don't know if we're old, but
we're not in our 20s, and we both have jobs.
Woo! Okay. Well, all right. Without further ado, thanks for being our guest here on The Force of Others. And remember, the Force of Others will be with you.
Always. The Force of Others, a Star Wars podcast.